He read my breakup text, out loud, in front of the whole office. Everyone laughed, except me. But he didn't know I had his messages ready for the big screen. My name is Lacey. I'm 29 years old. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The worst part wasn't the text. It wasn't even his voice reading it. It was the silence after. That awful, hollow silence when everyone stops pretending they didn't hear it and turns to stare. The office was cold that morning. One of those early spring days in New Jersey when the heat's off but the windows still leak a chill that creeps into your sleeves. The kind of day when the glass panels fog at the corners, when the vending machine hums louder than usual, when everyone's coffee turns lukewarm before the first meeting. I remember the printer's quiet whine near the front desk, spitting out reports like a heartbeat. The air smelled of lemon disinfectant and leftover burnt toast from the kitchen. A fluorescent light flickered above the copy table, a small stutter that had annoyed me for months. I came in early like I always did. 10 minutes of calm before the world started spinning. I liked the rhythm of those quiet minutes, checking my emails, reviewing client notes, sipping from my mug until the first footsteps echoed down the hall. Then he walked in. Craig. His shoes made that confident click against the tile, the sound of someone who believes the world claps when he enters. "Morning, team," he said, tossing his jacket on the chair nearest the window. "Got something fun for us today." He waved his phone like it was a trophy, the smirk already painted across his face. My chest tightened before he even started. I knew that look, the one he wore when he'd found new prey. He didn't wait for the team to settle. He never did. He just started reading. "I can't keep pretending we're okay. I cry in the shower. I flinch when I hear your voice. I need to be done. For real this time." His tone turned mocking halfway through, the corners of his mouth twitching with satisfaction. That was my text, sent at 2:04 a.m. to someone I once believed would marry me, not sent to Craig, not meant for anyone in that room. But there it was, floating in the air between cubicles and swivel chairs, between the fake fern and the humming fridge. Someone dropped their spoon into their cereal bowl. Milk splashed on a file. Someone else gasped and pretended to cough. I felt the flicker of that light above me again. Too bright, too loud. I didn't move. Craig laughed, the sound sharp and dry. "Y'all, Lacey's got some poetic heartbreak game, huh?" My face stayed still. My pulse didn't. Inside, something slid beneath my ribs, sharp, cold, deliberate. Not sadness, not embarrassment, something much heavier. He kept going, twisting my words into punchlines. Reading with. Exaggerated heartbreak, clutching his chest, milking laughter from the few people too scared not to join in. Then he tossed his phone on the table and said, "Just kidding. Chill, Lace. Found it on the printer tray. Print responsibly, people." Lie. I hadn't printed anything. My hands were still clean from the sanitizer by the door. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just closed my laptop. The hinge clicked, louder than I meant it to. "Aw, come on," Craig said, waving a hand. "Don't be dramatic. It's just a joke." I looked up at him. Really looked. He still thought he had the room. They always do, right before it flips. I stood, smoothed my skirt, and walked out. Not to the restroom, not to HR. To the third-floor server closet. It was quiet there, cold and humming with the sound of machines. Backup drives stacked like tiny safes. Months ago, the IT guy, Derek, had shown me how to reset the router after a thunderstorm outage. In the process, I'd learned something else, how message backups worked, how deletion wasn't always final. That memory uncoiled now like a gift. I pulled out my badge, unlocked the closet, and waited until the motion light flicked on. The machines blinked to life like an audience waiting for a show. I slipped in my USB drive and began searching. System logs, archived data, hidden sync folders. There they were, his files, Craig's. While the rest of the office went about their morning, laughing at the coffee machine or complaining about clients, I sat at my desk pretending to type invoices. Inside my screen, though, the real work unfolded. File after file opened. Not messages to me, to her, his secretary. The one who always giggled too loudly at his jokes. Messages time-stamped between midnight and 2 a.m. Lines that started with innocent questions and ended with things no professional should ever send. And not just her. 3 different names. 3 different message threads. The words blurred together. Compliments that slithered into something darker. Don't wear that blouse tomorrow. Wish we could grab drinks without HR breathing down my neck. Delete this. They're checking emails again. I felt my throat tighten, but not with fear, with clarity. I backed everything up, labeled the folder in plain text, Team Correspondence Review, pending. Then I waited. The morning crawled by, the air growing thicker as people whispered about what had happened. Every time I passed someone in the hallway, I could feel their eyes dart away. Craig avoided mine, whistling too loudly when I walked by. When the clock hit 12, the office started to stir with lunch chatter. Microwaves beeped, plastic forks clattered. The room smelled like leftover spaghetti and instant ramen. At 12:04 p.m., I stood, walked to the wall where the HDMI cord hung, plugged it into my laptop. The screen at the front of the break room flickered to life. Craig looked up from his sandwich. "What now? Another poetry reading?" he said with a grin. I didn't answer. I opened the folder and double-clicked. The first message filled the 40-inch screen. "Hey, don't wear that blouse tomorrow. It's hard to focus." The room fell silent. Forks froze mid-air. Second message appeared. "Lunch break, or should I call it a team-building session again?" A low ripple of whispers. Someone covered their mouth. Third message. "Delete this thread. HR's snooping again." Craig's laugh cracked. He shifted in his chair, the leather squeaking. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The timestamps spoke louder than words. Message after message filled the screen. Each one worse than the last. Names, dates, locations. A pattern no one could ignore. Craig stood. "Lacey, turn that off. Right now." I didn't move. I stepped back, folded my arms, and waited. The door to the hallway opened. Sarah from compliance entered with a clipboard mid-sentence about an audit. Her voice died halfway through. She looked at the screen, then at Craig. "Craig," she said softly, but the edge in her tone could have sliced glass. "My office. Now." He opened his mouth, closed it. His face turned a shade of gray that didn't look human. He walked out, the sound of his shoes no longer confident, just heavy. The door shut behind them. The room stayed frozen, breaths held. Someone's phone buzzed, but nobody moved to check it. I sat down, unwrapped my sandwich, took a bite, chewed slowly, because he wanted an audience for my pain. So I gave him one for his truth. Outside the glass wall, I could see Sarah gesturing sharply, Craig's shoulders slumping. The same people who'd laughed earlier now sat quiet, staring into their meals, pretending they hadn't enjoyed the show. For the first time all morning, I felt the heat return to the room, not from the vents, but from something deeper. A balance resetting. By the time I finished my sandwich, the laughter that had started my morning was gone, replaced by whispers that would outlive every deleted message. I didn't go back to my desk right away. I stayed in the break room, watching the air return to normal, one uneasy breath at a time. The silence had a weight of its own, pressing down on the room like humidity before a storm. Conversations started and stopped in small, nervous bursts. Half sentences, awkward laughter, the scrape of utensils against plastic trays. No one knew what to say. No one wanted to look like they were choosing a side, but I could feel their eyes, quick, darting glances from behind coffee mugs and half-open laptops. They weren't looking at me like a coworker anymore. They were looking at me like someone they didn't quite recognize. Maybe they were right. Maybe I didn't recognize myself either. When I finally stood, the chair legs made a soft, scraping sound against the laminate floor. That small sound sliced through the quiet, and everyone froze again. Even the microwave stopped humming. For one suspended second, the whole office seemed to breathe in and hold it. I walked past the vending machine, its neon lights flickering faintly. The reflection of my own face flashed across its glass panel, pale, composed, unflinching. The scent of burnt popcorn hung in the air. Someone's soup turned slowly behind the fogged glass of the microwave, spinning in lazy circles like time itself was stalling. The hallway outside smelled faintly of carpet cleaner. It was the kind of scent that never fully leaves an office. Sharp, sterile, pretending to be clean. My heels clicked against the tile in a steady rhythm. One step, then another. Slow, even, controlled. The sound became its own kind of mantra. Inside, though, my thoughts were a storm. Not loud, just relentless. Why did he print my text? Why did he think he could? Why did he smile while doing it? I reached my cubicle, dropped my bag into my chair, and stared at the monitor. Rows of spreadsheets stared back, neat, predictable, meaningless. My reflection flickered in the screen. My pulse thrummed beneath my skin like a secret I didn't want to keep. I stood again. My body moved before my mind could stop it. At the end of the hallway, the window overlooked the small patch of trees behind the New Jersey office park. The branches were still bare, a few stubborn patches of snow clinging to the grass in uneven mounds. Cars hissed along the distant road, their tires cutting through puddles. The ordinary world kept moving, utterly unaware that mine had just cracked open. I pressed my fingertips to the cool glass. The faint vibration of the heating vents buzzed beneath the windowsill. I focused on that, anything to anchor myself. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mara. Mara, saw your Instagram story. Are you okay? Call me. I frowned. I hadn't posted anything. Not since last weekend. A picture of the Atlantic City boardwalk, sunlight hitting the ocean just right. I'd captioned it, "Some endings are just beginnings." It wasn't meant for anyone in particular, but now I wondered if people had been reading into it. Mara always knew when something was wrong, even before I said a word. We'd met freshman year of college. She was the one who once drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to pick me up after a fight with my ex. The one who sat outside my apartment door until I opened it. I typed back with shaky fingers. It's work stuff. I'll call later. Before I could hit send, I heard footsteps behind me. Soft ones, not hurried, not cautious. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Janine from accounting. She was one of those quiet people who moved through chaos without ever touching it. She'd once left a peppermint tea on my desk after I'd had a migraine. She noticed everything, but she never made a scene. She stopped beside me, folding her hands in front of her. Her voice came out soft, barely above a whisper. Are you all right? Her question caught in my chest. I nodded, but my throat tightened halfway through the motion. I will be. Janine's reflection joined mine in the window. Her breath fogged the glass for a moment before fading. You didn't deserve that, she said. None of it. Her tone wasn't pity. It was fact. Steady, grounded. Something in me eased, just slightly, like her words gave permission for my lungs to fill again. He thought it would embarrass me, I said quietly. She didn't hesitate. He embarrassed himself. I almost smiled. Almost. Before I could reply, the door at the end of the hallway opened. 2 figures stepped inside. Sarah from compliance and James from HR. Their pace was firm, their expressions unreadable. They weren't here to chat. They walked straight toward me. My stomach twisted, but my hand stayed still at my sides. If this was about the projection, I was ready. Every file I'd shown had come from the company's own server. I hadn't hacked anything. I hadn't altered anything. I'd just shown what was already there. Sarah stopped 2 feet in front of me. Her voice was level. Lacey, can you come with us? I nodded. Of course. James didn't meet my eyes. That was my first clue something wasn't simple. Janine gave my hand a small squeeze, a quiet show of courage, before stepping aside. As I followed them, the sound of my heels seemed to echo down the hall, past the copier room with its smell of toner, past the glass conference rooms where silhouettes pretended to work. I caught snippets of whispers from behind cubicles. HR? Now? Oh my God, she's in trouble. We entered the HR office. Craig sat in the corner. His tie was crooked, his face pale. His leg bounced like it had a motor of its own. Good. Sarah closed the door. The latch clicked, a small, sharp sound that made my pulse sync with it. She folded her hands on the table. Before we begin, everything discussed here will be documented. Do you understand? Yes. Craig rubbed his forehead. James cleared his throat. Craig has made some allegations regarding your conduct this afternoon, James said. I blinked slowly. Allegations? Craig didn't meet my eyes, but his jaw tightened. She accessed private messages, he said quickly. Deleted ones, system files she had no business in. This is a violation, a serious one. He spoke like a man reciting a script he barely believed. Sarah turned to me. Lacey, did you access anything unauthorized? No, Craig scoffed. She showed personal conversations on the projector. How is that not unauthorized? I leaned forward slightly, calm but steady. The messages came from the company-owned server, retrieved through the standard recovery tool. The same one. IT uses for file restoration. It's not restricted, and nothing was altered. Sarah's eyebrows twitched upward. James shifted his stance. Craig blinked too fast. I continued, my tone unbroken. The messages weren't labeled private. They were work-related threads stored on company property. If Craig had privacy concerns, he shouldn't have used company assets for personal matters. Sarah leaned back slowly, processing. Craig's mouth opened, but I wasn't finished. And for the record, I said, Craig read my personal breakup text aloud to the entire office this morning, a message he obtained without my consent. Color drained from his face. It was printed, he stammered. I didn't print anything today. The silence that followed felt like gravity itself shifted. Sarah turned to him, her expression neutral but her tone cutting. Craig, did you access her files? He froze. The leg that had been bouncing stopped cold. I thought, he began, but the words died in his throat. James set his pen down. The click echoed like a verdict. Craig, he said quietly, please step outside. We need to speak with Lacey alone. Craig rose unsteadily. His shoes dragged against the carpet. He didn't look at me as he left. The door closed behind him. Sarah exhaled. Lacey, we won't take action against you. You acted in response to a clear violation. I nodded once. Thank you. But she wasn't finished. We're launching an internal investigation immediately. Craig will be placed on administrative leave pending review. My heartbeat slowed. Not relief, just confirmation that the world had finally tilted back toward balance. Sarah's voice softened. If you need support during this process, time off, legal guidance, anything, let us know. It startled me, that tone of care. I wasn't used to it here. I'll be fine, I said. She studied me for a long moment before nodding. James walked me to the door. Take the rest of the day, he said. I'd rather work. He gave a small, respectful nod. All right. The hallway outside felt different now, the air heavier, the whispering quieter, like everyone sensed something had shifted but didn't know where it would land. As I walked past the break room, I caught the projector screen still lowered. The HDMI cable dangled from the wall, swaying slightly, its silver tip catching the light. A few coworkers stood nearby, pretending to refill their water bottles. None of them spoke, but their eyes followed me. Not pity, not gossip. Something else. Something like respect. I returned to my cubicle, sat down, opened my laptop. The cursor blinked at me, slow, steady, waiting. For the first time all day, my hands were steady too, because Craig thought humiliation was the end of my story. He had no idea it was just the beginning. The next morning, I arrived at the office just before 8. The parking lot was still half empty, the asphalt glistening faintly with dew under the dull, early light. The sky stretched pale and uncertain, that washed-out blue-gray New Jersey gets in early spring. It wasn't quite morning yet, but it wasn't night anymore either. Just that suspended moment between them when the world hasn't decided what kind of day it's going to be. Inside, the building smelled like freshly waxed floors and somebody's reheated pasta. It was the kind of scent you only noticed when everything else was still. A reminder that people had lived whole days here, spilled coffee, laughed too loud, left crumbs on the counter. The elevator doors opened with a tired chime. Ellie, the receptionist, looked up from her desk. Her nails were painted a soft pink, chipped at the edges. She hesitated when she saw me. "Hey, Lacey," she said quietly. Her voice had that cautious gentleness people use around the newly changed, not pity, just care wrapped in uncertainty. "Morning," I replied. She gave me a small nod, a silent agreement to keep things simple. I appreciated that. The elevator ride to the third floor was silent. The air inside smelled faintly of paper and static, that metallic tang of office dust. I watched my reflection in the brushed steel doors, calm on the surface, but my fingers tapped lightly against my coffee cup. It wasn't nerves, it was awareness. The sense that the ground had shifted and every step now meant something different. When the doors opened, the hallway lights flickered awake. My heels made a muted rhythm on the tile. Craig's office was still there, his name still etched in black vinyl on the door, but the blinds were drawn now, and behind them, nothing. No jacket on the chair, no half-drunk coffee on the desk, no sign of his easy swagger. Just an empty space, heavy with silence. For a moment I stood there, just watching the stillness. It was strange how absence could have such presence. At my cubicle, I found a sticky note on my keyboard. Neon yellow, centered perfectly. It said only, no name, no initials, just a hand-drawn clapping emoji in blue ink. I almost smiled. Almost. The office was different that morning, quieter. Every conversation felt muffled, like people were speaking underwater. Screens glowed brighter than usual. Everyone was pretending to work, but you could feel the question pulsing through the air. What happens now? 10 minutes later, I was deep in a budget spreadsheet, the columns swimming slightly from lack of sleep when I heard my name. Lacey? I looked up. Sarah stood at the end of the aisle, holding a folder. Her tone was polite, but firm. The kind that didn't invite delay. "Can I borrow you for a sec?" "Sure." I grabbed a pen, just to have something to hold. A habit. Something to do with my hands when control felt too still. We walked down the hallway toward the smaller conference rooms. The light was soft there, filtered through frosted glass panels. As we passed the break area, I saw Janine glance up from her yogurt. She didn't smile, but she gave me a tiny nod, a quiet, steady acknowledgement. The kind of gesture that says, "I see you." Inside the conference room, Sarah gestured for me to sit. The table gleamed under the humming lights. A small plant sat in the corner, half wilted but trying. Sarah didn't waste time. "We completed our initial investigation," she said. I met her gaze. And she slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed emails, reports, screenshots, timestamps. Each piece of evidence laid out like puzzle pieces forming a shape I already knew. "Craig has been placed on indefinite suspension pending final review," she said. Her tone was even, professional, but the weight behind it was solid. His behavior was inappropriate, retaliatory, and potentially in violation of both company policy and state harassment statutes. The words hit the air like the sound of a locked door closing. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Thank you," I said softly, "for taking it seriously." Sarah nodded. "We're also recommending him for mandatory exit. That's in the hands of legal now." It took me a moment to process what that meant. It wasn't a slap on the wrist. It wasn't a quiet file note to be forgotten in a drawer. It was real, permanent. "Understood," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Sarah's expression softened. "I also wanted you to know, we're promoting internally for his position. You're on the short list." I blinked. "What?" "You've been quietly holding this department together for months," she said. "People noticed. I noticed." For a second, my thoughts stalled. All I could hear was the hum of the fluorescent light above us. "Thank you," I managed. We wrapped up the meeting with procedural details, HR protocols, confidentiality clauses, signature lines that turned something human into something official. I signed where she pointed, then stood. As I walked back to my desk, I passed Janine again. This time she smiled. Small, but warm. The kind of smile that said you did it without saying it. At 11:47 a.m., an all-staff email went out. Subject: Leadership Update. Effective immediately. No names were mentioned. Just standard corporate phrasing about organizational changes and ongoing transition. But everyone knew. You could feel it ripple through the building. That collective silence that spreads right after a secret becomes public. Conversations dropped to whispers. Keyboards paused mid-keystroke. And me? I just kept working. I opened a new spreadsheet, typed formulas, answered emails. The motions of normalcy, but underneath every click, I could feel a new rhythm forming. Slower, stronger. At 1:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Derek. The one I'd written that 2 a.m. breakup message to. Heard about what happened. You okay? For a few seconds, I just stared at the words. He hadn't replied when I sent that message. He hadn't called when I cried at 3 in the morning, staring at my phone screen waiting for a dot to appear. But now that everyone else had, now that my name had become something whispered between cubicles, I opened the message. Let the read receipt glow beneath it like a silent mirror. Then I locked my phone and put it away. At 3:25 p.m., Janine appeared beside my cubicle holding 2 mugs, steam curled from both. Coffee break? She asked. Desperately, I said. We walked out to the small patio behind the building, a concrete space with a few picnic tables and a view of the retention pond. The sunlight had finally broken through the clouds, hitting the water and turning it to gold. For the first time all week, the air didn't bite. We sat. The metal table was warm under my palms. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Janine said, "You know, when he read your text out loud, I wanted to throw my pen at him." I looked at her, half smiling. "Why didn't you?" She shrugged. "Because you looked like you didn't need anyone to speak for you." That quieted me, because she was right. I hadn't needed anyone, but it still meant something that someone had wanted to. We finished our coffee in silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. A pair of geese landed on the pond, scattering light across the ripples. Somewhere inside, a door slammed and faint laughter followed. The ordinary world moving again. Later that evening, I drove home through the New Jersey suburbs. The streets were lined with bare maples and rows of brick duplexes, the kind with tiny American flags fluttering from porches. The air smelled faintly of rain and gasoline. I passed the diner with the flickering neon sign, all-day breakfast, and thought about how strange it was that life can change completely while everything around you stays exactly the same. Some victories don't roar. They hum quietly beneath the surface, steady and sure. Craig had taken something from me, my privacy, my dignity, my silence, but I'd taken something from him too, his mask, his certainty, his power, and maybe that's what justice really is. Not loud, not dramatic, just true. The next morning, I was early again. Same parking spot, same window seat, same mug of coffee cooling beside my keyboard. But everything felt new. The hum of the machines, the chatter of the printers, even the morning light slanting across my desk. All of it seemed to breathe differently now. And I knew, as I straightened the papers on my desk and took my first sip of coffee, that this wasn't the end of something. It was only the beginning. By Friday, it wasn't just my office that knew. It began as a whisper, the kind that moves through cubicles faster than Wi-Fi. Someone's cousin in corporate HR, someone's old roommate in legal downtown. Fragments of truth carried through text messages and lunch breaks, building momentum with every retelling. Then, one morning, it appeared online, an anonymous post on a workplace forum. NJ firm puts manager on leave after public HR violation. Employee retaliates with projector reveal. No names, no company logo, just words, but words have weight. And the story sounded too familiar. By noon, I got an email from a coworker on the second floor. Subject: is this about what I think it's about? No message body. Just the link. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I closed my laptop slowly and walked out to the parking lot. The cold spring air hit my face like a wake-up call. The asphalt was still damp from the night's rain, that strange smell of thawed earth and oil mixing in the breeze, a scent only New Jersey could produce. I sat in my car, cracked the window, and let the wind sting my cheeks. For a moment, I just stared at the steering wheel, listening to the faint hum of traffic from the highway beyond the trees. Then, unexpectedly, I laughed. Just once, quiet. A small, startled sound. It felt foreign at first, like my voice was trying to remember how joy worked. For so long, I'd tried to stay small. In meetings, in relationships, in conversations where someone else's voice always seemed to matter more than mine, even with Derek. Especially with Derek. He used to call me too sensitive when I reacted to things that hurt, too dramatic when I asked for honesty, too much when I asked for anything at all. So I learned to ask for nothing, to shrink, to fold myself smaller and smaller until my silence became comfortable for everyone but me. Until Craig. Until that stupid, smug smirk when he read my pain aloud and called it entertainment. My private heartbreak stripped of dignity and handed to an audience like a game, and something inside me shifted, not loudly, not with rage, but with a deep, burning silence that knew exactly what to do. When I walked back inside, the office was unusually still. Not tense, just alert. People looked up when I passed, then quickly down again. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Keys hovered over keyboards. Even the printers seemed to hum more quietly. It wasn't awkward, it was reverent. Like they all understood something unspoken had changed. Not just in me, but in the way power moved through that building. Co-workers who once avoided me in the hallway now held elevator doors open. The ones who used to laugh at Craig's jokes stayed silent when his name came up. The shift was subtle but seismic. Around 2 o'clock, Janine appeared at my cubicle holding a folded piece of paper. Her face gave nothing away, but her eyes were bright. "You should see this," she said, placing it on my desk. It was a printed LinkedIn post. Internal opportunity. Interim operations manager. Now accepting applications. I stared at the title, Craig's title, the one I'd been told I wasn't ready for 2 years ago, the one that suddenly didn't have his name attached to it anymore. "Do you think they'll actually consider me?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I expected. Janine tilted her head, a soft smile forming. "I think they already are." Her words landed quietly, but they filled the room. Later that afternoon, as I was filing reports, Sarah appeared in the hallway. She stopped me with that calm, professional tone of hers, the kind that didn't need volume to carry authority. "Lacey," she said, "I wanted to personally encourage you to apply." I blinked. "I didn't think you were allowed to say things like that." She smiled, not the polite, HR-trained smile, the real one, tired, knowing, the kind women share when they've had to fight twice as hard to stand in the same room. "Sometimes policy can wait," she said quietly. "Sometimes we need to do what's right." When I got home that night, the apartment felt different. The walls weren't closing in anymore. The silence wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. I opened my laptop and stared at my old resume, the same one I hadn't touched in 3 years. The same one that felt like a time capsule from a version of myself who still apologized too much. Line by line, I began updating it. Job titles, certifications, the volunteer project I helped run during Hurricane Ida relief, achievements I'd dismissed as just doing my job. Each line felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By the time I was done, the document didn't feel like a formality. It felt like proof. I wrote a cover letter next, direct, measured, unapologetic. At 11:43 p.m., still in sweatpants, half a peanut butter sandwich forgotten beside me, I clicked submit. 8 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Derek again. "So this is who you are now?" No punctuation, no warmth, just accusation, like confidence was a crime. I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I typed one reply. "Yes." Nothing more, no explanations, no apologies. No room for him to step back into a story he'd already abandoned. I set the phone face down and went to bed. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Saturday morning, I woke to sunlight spilling through my curtains. The air smelled faintly of rain from the night before. I made pancakes, the messy, imperfect kind, and poured coffee into my chipped mug. I opened the windows, let the breeze in, and for once, the quiet didn't feel empty. I wasn't waiting for the next disaster. The other shoe had already dropped, and I was still standing. Later that weekend, I ran errands. The normal kind, groceries, dry cleaning, picking up my new glasses from the optical shop on Route 22. It was ordinary and beautiful. In the parking lot as I loaded bags into my trunk, a voice called softly behind me. "Excuse me, are you Lacey?" I turned. A woman stood a few feet away, maybe mid-30s, hair pulled back, an old employee badge clipped to her purse. "Yes," I said slowly. She smiled, not shy, but tired. The kind of smile that comes after surviving something. "I used to work at your company," she said. "Back in 19. Craig made things hard for me too." She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. I nodded once. "Thank you for telling me." Her eyes softened. She gave my arm a small squeeze, then walked away. I watched her go, my groceries forgotten for a moment. That simple exchange stayed with me the rest of the day. How many others had their own versions of that story? How many whispers never left the break room? How many women folded themselves smaller to fit into spaces that were never built for them? By Monday, something in the air had changed again. When I walked into the office, people didn't avoid my eyes anymore. They didn't whisper when I passed. They looked straight at me. Not with fear, with respect, the kind that doesn't need applause. I reached my desk and noticed an envelope tucked neatly into my keyboard tray, plain white, typed label, no handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single line. "Interview scheduled, Wednesday, 9:00 a.m., conference room, B. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for the meeting that could rewrite everything." I sat back in my chair, the paper trembling just slightly between my fingers. Then I took a breath, rolled my shoulders back, opened a new document on my screen. Interview prep. Not for revenge, for what came after. The morning of the interview, I didn't wear anything flashy. Just a navy blazer I'd owned for years, clean jeans, and the same pair of boots I'd worn the day I first got hired. The leather was softened now, scuffed at the toes from long winters and rainy commutes. The soles carried traces of pavement from 3 different offices, 4 different versions of myself. But they still fit. And that mattered more than anything new ever could. I arrived 15 minutes early. Not because I was overeager, but because I needed those minutes. To sit, to breathe, to remember how far I'd come. The building's morning hum had a different tone now. The receptionist smiled with recognition that wasn't quite formality anymore. The elevator mirrors reflected a woman who looked like she'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. Conference Room B waited on the west side of the building, all glass walls and clean lines, the kind of space designed to make you feel small. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, slanting gold across the table. Every creak of the leather chairs echoed like punctuation. I took a seat near the end and laid my folder on the table. Printed resume, references, performance reports, each page crisp and deliberate. At 9:03 a.m., the panel entered. Sarah from Compliance, Mr. Raymond from Corporate Strategy, and, to my surprise, James from HR. He gave me a short, steady nod, the same one he'd given me that day in the hallway when everything first began to tip. Sarah adjusted her glasses. "Thank you for coming, Lacey. Let's start with the basics. Why do you want this position?" I didn't give them the rehearsed speech I'd written. I gave them the truth. "Because I've already been doing it," I said. Quietly, for over a year. No one interrupted, no skeptical smiles, just pens scratching across paper, eyes fixed, listening. I talked about the projects I'd led, the budgets I'd balanced, the team I'd kept intact through chaos. I mentioned the retention plan I'd proposed 6 months earlier, the same one they'd just paid a consultant to rediscover. Mr. Raymond's brow lifted slightly at that. A quiet acknowledgement that he'd noticed the pattern. Then Sarah asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Let's talk about what happened last week. The air seemed to still. Even the HVAC hum flattened into silence. I didn't flinch. I responded to a public humiliation, I said, with the only thing I had left, the truth. I let it hang there, a simple sentence with all the weight of what it meant. Then I continued, calm and measured. I didn't do it to get this job. I didn't do it to tear anyone down. I did it because I refused to stay silent when someone turns my pain into entertainment. Sarah's pen stopped moving. James leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable but intent. I went on. You asked why I want this role. I don't want it because of what happened. I want it because I've seen what happens when leadership forgets that dignity matters. I want to lead without fear, and I know I can, because the people here already trust me. Not because of a title, because I listened when no one else did. The room stayed still for a long moment. Then Sarah closed her folder. Thank you, she said quietly. The interview ended at 9:47 a.m. By 10:12, I was back at my desk, pretending to scroll through emails while the adrenaline drained from my hands. The ordinary rhythm of the office moved around me again, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, printers humming. It was strange how normalcy could feel like both a comfort and a cliff. I didn't tell anyone about the interview, not even Janine. It wasn't secrecy, it was protection. I didn't want to carry anyone else's hope on top of my own. 2 days later, the email came. Subject, position offer, interim operations manager. I stared at the subject line for nearly a minute before I opened it. Inside, the official offer, salary adjustment, start date, a request for confirmation by end of day. My heart beat slow, deliberate, almost suspicious of what it was seeing. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stood, walked outside, sat on the same bench I'd cried on 2 weeks earlier. The air was cold enough to sting, sharp enough to remind me I was alive. Then I called Mara. I got it, I said. Her laugh burst through the phone before her words did. You better have. We both laughed then, not the bitter, hollow kind we'd used to share after bad dates and broken promises. This laugh was clean, loud, free. That Friday, I packed up my cubicle. No one had asked me to. It wasn't required. But it felt right. A ritual. Closing one chapter before stepping into another. I wiped down the desk, stacked the files I was keeping, and unplugged the small desk lamp I'd bought my first week here. Janine appeared in the doorway, holding a small box. Moving up? She asked. Looks like it, I said, smiling. She set the box on my desk. Inside was a mug. White ceramic, gold lettering across the front. The calmest storm. I swallowed hard. Thank you. She grinned. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You just won. Her words landed like a quiet anthem. Monday came faster than I expected. My first day as interim operations manager. Same building, same desks. But everything looked different from this side of the table. The glass walls reflected a version of me that stood a little straighter, spoke a little slower, carried no apologies in her voice. My first order of business was simple and overdue. I rewrote the office policy on personal conduct, clearer language, real accountability, zero tolerance for misuse of power no matter the title behind it. People noticed. Not because I demanded it, but because, for once, change felt tangible. Craig never came back. Last I heard, he'd applied to jobs out of state. No one mentioned him after that. No farewell email, no gossip, just absence. And that, in itself, felt like justice. Sometimes endings don't need closure. They just need quiet. In that quiet, I found something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Myself. The version of me that used to stay late just to get things perfect. The one who spoke softly but meant every word. The one who'd learned that power doesn't come from raising your voice. It comes from refusing to lower your truth. I sat at my new desk that afternoon, sunlight stretching across the floor, my coffee steaming beside a fresh notebook. For the first time, the hum of the office didn't feel like background noise. It felt like momentum, and as I typed the first memo under my new title, I caught my reflection in the glass wall again. The faint smile, the steady hands, the woman who didn't flinch anymore. because some stories don't end with applause, they end with peace. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.